Hello, everyone. Welcome. So, we are saying hello to Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, and as always, Discord. If you want to chill and just listen, you're most welcome to. If you want to be part of the conversation, take part in the chat. And as always, because I do these readings for free, I do have a tip goal, my virtual tip jar. You can find in the link tree in my bio, or as I used to say when I did actually care about what I said, the bink in my lio. But that was completely by accident initially. So hopefully we are on the last stretch of this one because it just makes me really angry. We are on chapter 10, and today we will probably get on to chapter 11 of interviews with Arundhati Roy called The Architecture of Modern Empire. And I also bought a copy of coffee. I bought a copy of the book to give to my mother for Mother's Day. And she finally got around to reading it. And she says that it is one of the most brilliant books on empire and how empire is constructed, essentially, around the world. Even though it uses India as the example, mostly, it is applicable to the rest of the world as well. And this is my mother who has studied empire really closely. For those of you who don't know my mother, about my mother, we call her Comrade Mum for a reason. She is a history major and did basically got halfway through her master's in sociology before she just got tired. And she was like, I don't need a master's. So yeah, she's studied in history and sociology and politics as well, and a former activist against apartheid. To give you an idea of what my mother is like, I tried to. She has a first edition translation of The Dictatorship of the Proletariat by Vladimir Lenin on her bookshelf. And so one day I decided, you know what? She read this a long time ago, and she hasn't picked up the book since. Like for a very long time, she hasn't picked up the book. So I'm just gonna nick it, and just take it from the bookshelf and just put it on mine. And she noticed, of course, because nothing gets by her. And she's like, you know that woman who does the stitches of people finding things that they shouldn't be taking out of the ground and stuff? She didn't even look at me when she said, put it back. And so I started making excuses. I'm like, but it's our book, comrade. And without even skipping a beat, said, well, you tell me when you've freed a country, comrade. So I went back upstairs, I put the book back on the bookshelf, and I went home. So yeah, that's my mother. And she and I had the conversation about this book, about how beautifully Roy explained. I love her so much. How Roy explains the theater of politics. And she's I think 2/3 of the way through because my mother reads like lightning. But we spoke about not just the theater of politics, but on how she explains the mechanisms of empire and how each aspect of empire works to build this kind of seemingly indestructible wall of empirical kind of knowledge, understanding of the world, norms, value systems, morality, media systems, all of these things that are used as bricks in the wall of empire, and how they work so intrinsically together. And that is why I constantly talk about the trifecta of oppression: the patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism that work hand in hand with each other, that kind of prop each other up, and you cannot take one down without taking the other down, because they work to support each other. So if you take down capitalism and you leave white supremacy and patriarchy, capitalism will emerge again. And same with the others. And we were talking about how intricate the system is and how it's built using media systems, how it's built using knowledge systems, how it's built using various arms of government and legal systems and the electoral system. So when you have people fighting for self-determination, we are up against a monster. And those monsters are in suits and ties. They are representatives. So when people say that there are 500,000 people marching in the streets of Jaffa, which is now called Tel Aviv, right now, protesting Bibi Netanyahu's government, he's just a face, one of the millions of people who are chosen as a face of empire. He is not empire. He is a representative of empire. The problem is not Netanyahu. The problem is the Israeli state in that regard. So you have people who are fighting for self-determination, Palestinian people who are fighting for rightful self-determination, who are up against the empire that supports the Israeli state, who are up against the ideologies that support the Israeli state, the money, all of the mechanisms of empire that support the Israeli state. And all of a sudden, it feels really, really hopeless when you think about all of those things. It's easy to put a face to it, and it's easy to say that it is Netanyahu. But it's not just Netanyahu. It is not just Ben Gvir. They are representatives of empire. And when they die, there will be somebody to replace them. Because when I was growing up, people said it was Ariel Sharon. And now it's Netanyahu. No. Same person, different face. So we get into page 191 of The Architecture of Modern Empire, Conversations with Arundhati Roy. You have stated that Kashmiris have the right of self-determination. Well, it's the same people, in fact, who disrupt everything I do. Everywhere I speak in India, they show up. They disrupt public events of mine all the time. You said in recent interviews, the country that I live in is becoming more and more repressive, more of a police state. India is hardening as a state. It has to continue to give the impression of being a messy, cuddly democracy, but actually, what's going on outside the arc lights is really desperate. How does a writer like you, an individual citizen, navigate that hardening of the arteries? Oh, that is an important question. Because writers are supposed to be the kind of last defense of the people's voice. The hardening of the arteries. Because at the heart of society, closest to the heart of society, you have its writers, you have its storytellers. Anybody interested in Warhammer? When Horus decided to what's the word? Defect. yes, he planned this entire assault on Esteban and all of that. Why did he kill the remembrances? You made my tea. Please.
I'm not doing your standing nonsense.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody is into Warhammer, ask, why did he kill an entire room of remembrances? Kill the messengers. Kill the people who tell the stories. And that is the kind of last link between a system and its people. So she says, just by traveling, I think, and seeing what's going on, by talking to people, keeping in touch, not just having 6,000 researchers, but having real friendships with people who do not belong to the society that are in the arc lights. It's frightening to see what's happening in Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Kashmir, Manipur, and Nagaland. It's been going on for a long time, but everywhere is becoming a sort of surveillance society. And then you have people who are like the one on Geeky's Live just now, who's a cuck for the surveillance state. And why? It benefits nobody but those in power. And people like him are never going to be in proximity to that power enough to benefit from it. So why support it? Because he believes that he's a temporarily inconvenienced millionaire or billionaire. Phones are tapped, emails are tapped. They're trying hard to control the internet. I could tell you horror story after horror story of what's going on in India, but that's not the point. It's important for us to understand structurally what the game is and how to see how to navigate it. That's what I do as a writer. Sometimes it's not easy. When Anna Hazare was happening, it wasn't easy going against the grain of some of my closest friends, but I didn't think that they were going to see the situation clearly. And that is where the writers step in and say, I'm taking apart this information so you don't have to. Yes, absolutely. Be critical. But understanding the structural game of what is going on, that is where the writers lie. Picking apart all of these various parts of the structure for people to see clearly the whole picture broken down into little bits and saying, this is what is happening here, this is what is happening there. J.D. Vance's sectional. I have a joke for you. Are you still here? Please tell me that you are here. When I travel around India, the level of pushback and resistance is remarkable, and particularly high against the most disadvantaged. The word poor doesn't begin to describe the economic situations. In Odisha, there's a struggle right now over a proposed South Korean steel mill. It's the largest single foreign investment project in India's history, more than $12 billion. They're securing their own private port where they can export directly to East Asia. There has been a tremendous amount of resistance there. Roads have been blocked. People have been able to at least slow down and in some instances stop various projects like this. So she says amazing things are happening in India. But I just want to add the caveat. If you look at what's happening in India in the late 60s and 70s, why did the Naxalite movement arise? It arose demanding land to the tiller. The message of the people has always been the same. Always been the same. Power to the people. Saying that the Indian government, when it won independence, had promised the end to Zamandiri. The Zamandirs. Thank you, my love. Love you. You're handsome. Bye. Sweet dreams. Bye. Bye, okay? Bye. had promised the end to Zamandiri, the system of huge landlords with serfs tilling the soil for them. But that land distribution hadn't happened. The Naxalite movement was crushed in the 60s, and you had more reactionary sort of movements arise. Jayaprakash Narayan saying Sampurna Kranti, which means total revolution, but again asking for redistribution. From then to now, look where we've come. From demanding land for the landless, today we are fighting just for people who have a little bit of land to be able to hold on to it. The masses of displaced people, the masses of people of lower castes who have been rendered landless, who live in cities in squalid conditions outside of radical politics today. We must never forget the people who are fighting, putting up resistance, and still have some land. The Adivasi communities still have their own lands. They are fighting not to allow the corporates to take over, but the idea of saying that there has to be justice, the idea of taking back from the expropriators and land to the tiller has more or less disappeared. Because every time empire has taken more, they've encroached so far that every time we push back, we ask for less and less and less. So at least give us this. At least give us that. Okay, if you can't give us that, give us this. And we have learned over centuries to compromise for the sake of peace. For the sake of not rocking the boat too much, because their toys have gotten bigger and deadlier. The biggest threat to this world is heteropatriarchal corporate capitalism that pretty much operates under white supremacist narcissism. Because who does it benefit? So the demand of land to the tiller having disappeared, it's not by accident. It's not because people lost interest in it, because people absolutely still want their land. People, looking for something. It's a slip of paper I had written a quote on, but I can't find it now. I had it there. The cat probably thought it was a till slip. It's not because land to the tiller is not needed. It's because we've learned to ask for less. Or in the case of people who have said things like, I can't do this fight anymore because my family needs me to keep my job. Or things like, I can't risk putting my family in danger, my children in danger. I have to focus on this or that or whatever. And they say, you know what, just me posting on Facebook and sharing things on TikTok is going to have to suffice. The fewer people we have willing to sacrifice comfort for the greater good, the less we are able to ask for, the less we are able to fight for. And frankly, I'm done asking for freedom. Because nowhere in the history of mankind has freedom been granted by the oppressor. Because if white America had its way, slavery would still be a thing. Before we feel too good about ourselves, we have to realize that we have been pushed against a wall in so many ways. I don't know when that bubble is going to burst or how, but it will not be politically necessary. Oh, it won't be political necessarily. It will be lumpen and criminal. It is difficult to organize the poor in these huge cities where they live working like slaves, some of them laboring 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Where's the time for politics? Where's the time for organization? It is extremely difficult, and that is on purpose. That is 100% on purpose. Because a proletariat who is too tired is a proletarian who cannot resist his oppression. Any questions so far? And where's the space for dissent in India? I'm thinking of Jantar Mantar, a place where you are allowed to demonstrate. A little sliver of sidewalk, like an island right off Congat Place in New Delhi. And here in the US, we also see cordoned off free speech zones that the police assign for dissent. How bizarre is that? There seems to be a shrinking of space. I've been to Occupy Wall Street in New York, spoken there. The idea in this establishment, both in India and America, and I'm sure China and everywhere else, is to deny people physical territory where they can assemble unless they belong to the middle class. The people who are demanding any kind of radical change are not going to be allowed to assemble. So how do you gather and scatter and gather and scatter? Because everything is under surveillance. There are cameras everywhere. There are police everywhere, and they're watching our communications. It's frightening. Yesterday I was at a talk. Somebody asked an interesting question. They said the slogan of Occupy Wall Street protests was, "We are the 99%. But when you look at the rest of the world, that 99% is the 1% in terms of privilege compared to the poor of India or Africa. And how has that privilege been accumulated? The US has always stimulated its economy by manufacturing weapons and exporting war, whether indulging in war itself or supplying India and Pakistan with billions of dollars worth of weapons. When I think about the struggle here about being about jobs in some way, I hope they're not going to be those kinds of jobs. Come and make missiles for us. Come and make Black Hawk helicopters for us. Police have to be understood in a different way. Not country-wise anymore, but in other kinds of solidarities. Politics, sorry, not police. Maybe I should take a minute or two. So what do you think about everything that I've been saying now? I'll be right back, Twitch and YouTube. and welcome back Twitch and YouTube. So I would like you to think about what this kind of solidarity talk makes you feel about your own activism and where you can get better and where you can improve, where you can alter certain behaviors. How has that privilege been accumulated? The US has stimulated its economy, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Politics has to be understood in a different way, not country-wise anymore, but other kinds of solidarities. The Indian state, like other states, seeks to control the message. They want to frame discussion on their terms. This is quite understandable. There's nothing revelatory here. There seems to be, at least in the case of India, an attempt to limit dissent by limiting access to the country, even inside the country. Oh. And that can be said of the US as well, because limiting access to the country itself is limiting access to democracy. So what is deporting brown citizens? What is just deportation in general? I love the name. Oh, okay, so the person who entered Oguhle, I love that name so much. If you're still here. I love that name. Kuhle means, Kuhle is like good. It seems difficult for Indian nationals themselves to travel. Yeah. Travel, difficulties in travel, like limiting people's access to different spaces, limits their access to freedom, not just freedom of movement, but freedom of knowledge as well, because if all you know is the space in which you exist and nothing else, firstly, you'll go mad. And secondly, it's a form of imprisonment. And that's what is happening, what's happened for the past 30 years in Gaza. That it's the walls of Gaza. In 2004, Israel bombed the airport. It's not been functioning since 2004. So when people are not allowed to leave, not allowed freedom of movement, like in apartheid South Africa, people weren't allowed freedom of movement, especially without a dompas. And the Interaction Insight says, do you believe individual freedom can coexist with structural regulations? I mean, just that question in itself. What do the regulations exist for? Who do the regulations exist for? Gautam Navlaka, a journalist and human rights activist, was sent back from Srinagar Airport. A US academic, Richard Shapiro, was denied entry into India in November 2010. In September 2011, May Aquino, human rights activist from the Philippines, was denied entry. In late September, I was denied. A dangerous man, she says. At New Delhi, Indira Gandhi International Airport. This has a chilling effect. So what's going on? Is this a new development where their borders being controlled in such a way? And let me tell you, good night, B. Let me tell you, it's not new. It's absolutely not new. I have never set foot in the motherland, but I was banned. Thank you. There's a reason. Because as soon as you start telling the truth, as soon as you start letting people know that this is the truth about what the government is doing, what corporates are doing, how many people have been arrested with all of these leaked papers? And I've said it before, the Panama Papers. The only person who's faced any sort of consequence is the person who leaked them is dead. And there's a video I watched earlier today on whistleblowers who have mysteriously died. All of them ruled suicides. It's not new. It's been a while now that if you're a businessman, if you want to buy or sell a mine or organize shipment of iron ore, you don't need security clearance. But if you're an academic or journalist, a writer, a scholar, then you need security clearance. Obviously, journalists as well as NGOs are in India on the sufferance of the government. That has been made clear all the time. You have to toe a delicate line. You have to keep deciding how far you can push things, how much truth you can tell, and how much you should keep quiet. A lot of people told me, delete my social media while I was applying for my US visa to do my PhD. I did for a little while I was going through the application process. Ultimately, that delicate line didn't matter. It really didn't matter. Because when they look through in your whole records and they see you have been on the side of the people and you are not towing the line of official statements, you're not invited to the party. You get turned away at borders. You get detained. So we cannot keep quiet about anything. We shouldn't. I've been told by foreign correspondents that their own desks from newspapers outside of India have said, we want good news. The bad news is boring. The real reason is that India is a finance destination, so there's no need to disrupt this by talking about all the cruelty that's going on. Ew. It's almost as if the Indian government acknowledges Kashmir as a different country because they stop people from going there. They send them back from the airport. They can't easily go into Chhattisgarh now. It's dangerous. Police have basically said we're shooting to kill beyond the Indravati, the river that defines Mao's territory for the police. So you go in at your own risk. What I find interesting is while all of the silencing is going on, the kind of noise that the government would like to hear is building. So almost every weekend you have literary festivals with international publishers and authors. I don't think they need security clearance. They come as visitors. They don't disturb the grass. They go from Jaipur to Goa and I don't know where. Every newspaper has a literary festival and they're funded by these very corporations that are underneath the silencing. So they're not going to have authors who are disrupting the system. They even wanted to have one in Kashmir. You were deported because they were frightened you were going to write about the discovery of mass graves. You can have a literary festival in Kashmir, but David Barsamian can't write about mass graves. What sort of literary festival is this? What will Kashmiris be allowed to say? If they say something wrong, will they be taken directly to an army camp or allowed to go home to change their clothes first? I find the simultaneous orchestration of noise and silencing quite interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Is Geeky still live? And so, if you are looking at the system and writing about it in ways that criticize it, that bring to light things that people didn't know, these literary festivals that are organized by and are funded by corporations don't want to look at your stuff. They don't want to invite you to speak. Thanks, Kiara. Because they are afraid of words. So when people say that books cannot change the world, tell that to every author who's had their book banned. Tell that to every school that has had books taken off their shelves. Tell that to every author who's had their books burnt in the streets. In December 2009, the Buried Evidence Report was issued by a group of human rights activists. It documented the many graves containing thousands of bodies in Kashmir. That was recently actually verified by a state commission, which felt obligated because of public pressure to conduct its own investigation. So there have been 2 reports now about the mass graves. What ensued in terms of investigation, because anywhere from 8 to 10,000 Kashmiris have gone missing since 1989. Could these be some of the people in those unmarked graves? They could be. I suppose it's distressing to those who still hope that the missing are alive for us to assume the missing are dead. One doesn't know until DNA tests are done. The important thing is that these graves are in only 3 out of the many more districts of Kashmir. So what is happening to the other graves? Are they being desecrated or quickly removed? Are they going to be limited to us? Or to this? Nothing ever happens to any army officer who has committed a crime, either summary execution, which is known as a fake encounter in India, or mass execution or rape. Nothing ever happens. The army has complete impunity. So what will happen? I don't know. The disappearances and mass graves build anger, but the government knows how to short-circuit this. How do you allow people to vent their anger and calm down? How do you create a collaborator class that has huge stakes in the Indian occupation? And how do you divert debate? And whenever somebody pivots on a panel, I keep telling them they are practicing white supremacy. They are practicing heteropatriarchal white supremacy. They are agents of heteropatriarchal white supremacy because they are diverting the attention away from the issue. I will say this, for the Indian occupation in Kashmir, it's a brilliant occupation. The world should learn from the detail with which it operates. The alternating of violence and reward, the cajoling of the media. If this is the way the world is headed, I think it is. If you want to maintain the system of capitalism that allows a few hundred people to own half the wealth of the US and 100 people to own assets worth a quarter of the gross domestic product in India, then you are going to need to control societies militarily. And if you want a PhD in how to do that, come to India. When I was in Kashmir in February 2011, I interviewed Khurram Parvez of the Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society. He told me about the level of surveillance and how detailed and sophisticated it is. He said, "Every small thing in Kashmir is monitored. I've done human rights work for the past 12 years. Over that time, I've forgotten a lot of things, but the files maintained in the interrogation centers and intelligence bureaus are complete. They can give the details of what I did on any day. They tell us sometimes, you met such and such a person on such and such a date. We would have forgotten, but they keep a record for us. The surveillance is extensive. Emails, phone calls, even with family members are monitored. A lot of people here have voice trackers. Their voices are being tracked on any mobile they use. Not only is Kashmir the densest militarized zone in the world, but maybe also the most heavily surveilled. Think about the psychological aspect of that, knowing that when you're talking to a loved one or close friend, everything is being monitored. Emails are being read. When I got to the border of the US, How did they know about my relationship with Ross? Back in 2022. What does this do to a population? We know what it does. We know the exponential rise of people with psychiatric disorders and suicidal tendencies in Kashmir. But it's not just the state that it's spying on its subjects. This whole network of informers is as well. People in your own house can be spying on you. It's a bit like the Soviet Union. If somebody in your circle is arrested, then you have to denounce them or you'd be arrested. It's a slow poison dripping into society which is completely unforgivable. And for what? What is this idea? What is this map that you have in your head? You have this map of India in your head which is somehow sacred, regardless of what you do in parts of that country. When West Pakistan was committing a kind of genocide in East Pakistan, it was morally okay for Indians to go in and liberate it, So you have this morality that curls in on itself and becomes implacable. Why is it so hard for people to see that between the debacle in Afghanistan, the expansion of war by Obama in Pakistan, where drones are killing civilians with no accountability, and a situation in which both Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons and both countries have crazy religious radicals, Kashmir could actually be a buffer? Pakistan has acute internal problems, committing atrocities in Balochistan. None of these states are moral states. If you criticize India, that doesn't mean that you're pro-Pakistan. No. Similar kinds of things are happening in Balochistan and as is in Kashmir. Parvaiz Bukhari, an independent Kashmiri journalist, told me something rather startling. One of the reasons the Indian government offers to justify its occupation in Kashmir is the fear that some 200 million Muslims living in India would then be subjected to a Hindu backlash if Kashmir became independent. That speaks volumes as to the insecurity and vulnerability of this huge minority inside India. Whether or not Kashmir becomes independent ought to have nothing to do with what is happening with the Muslim population in India. What is happening with the Muslim population in India is terrible. They, along with Dalits, have been pushed right to the bottom of the social scale, but Dalits are at least rising up in terms of demanding political representation. You have Mayawati and Lalu Prasad Yadav. Kumari Mayawati, Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh and President of the Bahujan Samaj Party, the Majority People's Party, the Lalu Prasad Yadav, the former Chief Minister of Bihar and President of the Rashtriya Janta Dal, the National People's Party. All of this is going on, but the Muslims are being pushed down without representation, living in ghettos. In Delhi, they live in the Shah Jahanabad ghetto. In Gujarat, they live in ghettos. West Bengal, Kolkata, a state ruled by the left for so many years, they live in ghettos. What is happening to the Muslim community and the terror under which it lives is nothing to do with Kashmir. It has to do with the rise of radical right-wing Hindutva ideology and a kind of majoritarianism that shades into open fascism, as we see in Gujarat. But I don't think we should link those two things. And they want us to link those two things because they want an excuse to say, but look, if we give this concession, look what happens there. But they are still controlling what happens there. It's the same people, it's the same ideology. It's the same greed that governs the occupation of Pakistan and the repression of Indian Muslims by Hindu nationalists. Aww. Many people were expecting that would be even more protests in Kashmir in the summer of 2011. Why didn't that happen? I don't know. I'm really not equipped to say. I think that perhaps there's a lot of thinking going on right now. You don't want to enter a situation where so much energy goes into an uprising that people are killed, young people are jailed. And what happens next? It gets short circuited and you get kicked back into the cycle. So perhaps people are thinking through what comes next. What kind of azadi, or freedom? What kind of society? What kind of constitution? What is it that we would like it to look like? Because it's not fair to expect young boys to just be on the street, braving bullets, getting their heads blown off without a political plan. When India was fighting for its freedom and the British said the natives are not ready for democracy, there were so many ways in which communities were divided, particularly Hindus and Muslims. The violence of partition was a result of that. The British really took advantage of it. Now the Indian state is trying to divide Kashmiris, put them one against each other, and Ladakhis and Jammuites and Gujars and Shias. I understand it's difficult for people to have an open discussion when there are AK-47s aimed at your head. Oof. So initially, they need to be allowed to think, argue with themselves. Argument is not always unhealthy. We need to work out what the next step is going to be. I hope that is what is going on, because questioning what people want, when that questioning comes from the occupier, it's mischievous. Yet people who are occupied need to have some hard debates. There are hard debates between Gandhi and Nehru and Ambedkar. Those debates do need to take place, and perhaps that's what's going on. I don't know. The debating that we have on TikTok is, I'm sad to say, it's not it. I'm sorry, it's a grift. Because these are not political debates that actually benefit people. It benefits the host and gives a platform to the hateful. A November 2011 report from the Pentagon to Congress observes the relationship between the US and India in what Obama has called one of the defining partnerships of the 21st century is a priority for the US government and for the Department of Defense. I wonder why. The US and India are natural partners, destined to be closer because of shared interests and values and our mutual desire for a stable and secure world. Thank you, Louis. All the love to you too. A strong bilateral partnership is in the US interest and benefits both countries. We expect India's importance to US interests to grow in the long run as India, a major regional and emerging global power, increasingly assumes roles commensurate with its position as a stakeholder and leader in the international system. I wonder why India is Zionist. And why India has such close ties with Israeli surveillance companies. If you were around when I was reading the Palestine Laboratory last year, you'll understand that relationship. Further on, it says, relationship building between US and Indian defense personnel is one of the Department of Defense's highest priorities for the US-India defense relationship. We also learned that US Special Operations Forces interact with their Indian counterparts, so clearly the US government and military see India in a particular way. I'm interested in their comment that partnership would benefit US interests, but those interests are not spelled out. What might those interests be? And what do you think about this emerging alliance? It's now cemented, especially now that India is just so far right-wing in its government and people. I could bet you there's exactly the kind of same document between India and Israel as well. Called it. It has to do with many things. Recently, there was a US sale of something like $5 billion worth of military aircraft to India. But I think over the next 5 years, India is going to be one of the biggest purchasers of weapons. The budget is something like $45 billion. If you look at what's happening globally, all of it has to do with countering China. The US is sending troops into Africa. As Afghanistan is becoming unmanageable and Pakistan is not behaving itself, the US is stepping back into India. Not only does it have a huge market for consumer goods, a huge market for military equipment too, and a geopolitical base to counter China. They must be worried about Nepal now, seeing it as an ally of China. Pakistan is talking to China all the time. So India is going to be used as a pawn in the US's game. Apart from the fact that it's buying all of China's outdated nuclear technology and allowing it to dump toxic waste, and is a traditional market for this in the sense of buying cars and cell phones and air conditioners and whatever, India too is competing with China as well as the US for resources in Africa. The game is afoot. But where are people dying the most? In Africa. In places that are funded by US allies, and mines that are owned by the US and Israel. By the way, the llama on my mug is named Michelle Olama. I was looking at your 2002 speech in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and struck by its almost prophetic character. I don't know if it's fresh in your memory. You're being like those policemen in Kashmir, pulling up my files. Yes, I have your file here. In Santa Fe, you said America's corporate heart is hemorrhaging. So you had a sense then that there was something seriously wrong with the US economy and the structures here. She says, how could it be otherwise? I'm not an economist, but you don't have to be to see what's going on. So do you think that murmur is a little bit louder now of the goddess saying another world is still possible? How does it seem? Does it seem more pronounced now than 9 years ago? I think it is. Both sides are saying another world is possible. The other side is saying a world of military rule is possible. A world of complete surveillance is possible. A world of capturing the imagination of people and holding it down is possible. And we are saying that there are too many of us to hold down all the time. So the recruitment is happening on both sides. And I think that's where I shall stop for today. Any questions? All right. Please remember, I do these readings for free. So if you can hit up any of this goal, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But yeah, I'm going to end the stream on Twitch and YouTube. Fare thee well.